to the Weekly Bioanalysis, a KCAS podcast.
Hello and welcome to the 46th episode of the Weekly Bioanalysis, the official podcast of KCAS Bioanalytical and Biomarker services. KCAS is a bioanalytical CRO serving the pharmaceutical and biopharmaceutical industries for over 40 years. My name is John Perkins and I've been in the bioanalytical LCMS space for over 26 years. I'm here with my co-host Dominic Guarino.
Hello, my name is Dominic Guarino, and I've been in the cell and gene therapy as well as the ligand binding assay space for a little over 27 years.
I'm located in upstate New York, Dom's in Kansas, and our producers are in Missouri and Kansas City, so we're all over the map. We're thrilled to have you listening to the 46th episode of this podcast, which is now available virtually everywhere. Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon, and many others. Wherever you choose to find and play your podcast, you can now likely find the Weekly Bioanalysis. We welcome all of you, whether you are joining us for the first time or if you're a regular listener. As many of you know, if you've listened to any of our previous episodes, we started the podcast when COVID restrictions prevented us from continuing business as usual. We were unable to meet colleagues face-to-face, but we want to continue communicating with all of you. The podcast was an idea we'd always had, but it suddenly became the perfect medium for us to employ. Due to other pressing issues, today's podcast will be an abbreviated version with a review of the latest news and resources. We're holding off on a main topic of our choosing until next time. However, we're constantly looking for topics and we'd be happy to discuss something that you want us to cover. So again, we're fired up to have you here and we're looking forward to a fun episode today. To kick us off for podcast number 46, we're going to jump into the news and resources section. Dom.
Okay, John, so let's just jump right into the news and resources. We'll start, as always, with the latest on COVID. And John, here's one that I think just highlights how contagious COVID is, right? So over half the deer tested in Michigan have been exposed to SARS-CoV-2. So John, this one I don't know if it surprises me, but I think it just gets back to like how much this how contagious the virus is, how easy it is to transmit. And it's just I think it's a crazy story about how, the deer in Michigan are all COVID-19 positive.
Yeah, I mean, it's so basically the reason why we know is the USDA are take data from deer to check for, for viruses, etc. Because I think the concern is what species out there may pick up the virus and what could possibly act as a reservoir to transmit it back to humans, although the transmission from wild deer to humans is unlikely. But what if it mutates and then comes back to humans, even though it's an unlikely route? So that's the concern here. I mean, they tested domesticated deer, captive deer, and they showed nothing. But the wild deer population in Michigan, it's like something like 30% of the population had showed signs of SARS-CoV-2. I don't know how the transmission happened, but yeah. It's really, and we've seen things like this in the past where there's been various primates in zoos and stuff, and then I think large felines as well. So it's just something that obviously is going to be monitored, but you're right, it points to contagiousness, and just having to watch this virus on all fronts.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about how are we going to get out of this pandemic, how are we going to curtail it? I mean, on the surface, it's like, well, why are we testing deer? Well, no, why aren't we testing more animals? It's the complete opposite. Don't look at this as like, what, some people might say, oh, this is superfluous spending by the government. Well, no, not at all. These are the things that, if what you don't know, you don't know. Like, this enables us to better understand where it's coming from, where it's, I think of where's the repository of COVID, and it could potentially be in wild animals. Obviously, that's sort of what I think when I read these types of articles. And then, John, it still gets back to like conceptually, all the COVID virus in the world could fit in a Coke can, right? That's still that kind of comes to mind when I read these types of articles.
But yes, but another thing I picked up, I don't believe that. Anyway, but for my, you can ignore that alarm. Another item is actually Zoetis are developing an animal vaccine, and there was a article about a primate center in the US looking at possibly vaccinating animals. So, I mean, there is something out there for coming for animals. Zoetis obviously being the animal health wing of Pfizer. So that might be something we touch on in a future future podcast. But
John, yeah, you're an animal lover. I'd vaccinate my cat. I mean, that I would definitely do that if it was up to him.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, I mean, we do it for feline leukemia and all
Yeah.
these other things. Yeah, I've understood. Yeah, it's
No, I think it just highlights how tactical we need to be with trying to really treat this. Just like the more we know, the better. I think it's a step towards, like, where is it, right? Where is the
sure,
virus?
yeah.
Where is it coming from? And to your point, how was it that the wild deer had it, but the petting one, that just makes it more like, was it always there? Parts of me is like, maybe this was always here too, but let's maybe not go down that path, right?
I don't know. I mean, obviously we'll keep reading, and as we hear things, we'll update on something like this. Yeah, let's move on to the next topic, because we talk about being informed and how it can help us. Yet here we have a survey by the Kaiser Family Foundation that says the majority of unvaccinated US adults don't see COVID-19 vaccines as effective and believe getting the shot is a bigger risk than the virus itself. I want to include this and put this to bed, because there's so much nonsense out there in terms of people think they know better than the medical community and what they've read out there. And we have this internet where it's a fund of information, but it's also a fund of misinformation. It wasn't a huge survey. It was like 1,500 adults, and of those, less than 482 had not got the vaccine. But then over half of those are saying, well, we don't want to get it because it's ineffective and more dangerous than the virus itself. But of course, what we've seen in parallel is a number of articles where news companies are visiting hospitals, and you've got intubated patients who are now like lying in their bed. And there was one I watched last night, where it was a fairly sobering, 7-minute film, and there was one guy saying, "Yeah, I'm a libertarian, and I feel it's down to personal choice." And if you watch to the end of the video, that he actually died nine days after the video was made. And this is, sadly, people are on the basis of this making a choice that's putting their own health and other people's health at risk. All for the sake. I'm not sure why this vaccine has become the one that has become the line in the sand that people
I don't know.
won't take.
It's an unbelievable phenomenon that so many people are in denial about the vaccine, whether it's efficacy or even the safety of it. It never has there been a bigger case in terms of, it's like, I think to date it's the largest phase 3, phase 4, however you want to think of it. It's the largest clinical trial that's ever happened in our country. I don't know if you knew that, John,
Sure.
because of the size of it. And to sit here and think there's obviously I don't believe any safety issue at all, or you'd be seeing that. But the thought of the misinformation of the unvaccinated it's just scary. And
Yeah.
it seems to be getting worse and worse. They're just the fact, like, there's a lot of misinformation around science, but the science cannot be denied
Sure.
when it comes to
Absolutely.
who's in the hospital, right? Like, who's the people dying of COVID are all unvaccinated. And it's just, the numbers are staggering. I think it's
Sure.
something like 90% of all people in the hospital with a COVID, on a ventilator, a serious condition, it's higher, 99 or something,
It's
are
it's in that
unvaccinated.
99 range. Yeah.
I don't know how we've gotten to a point where people, and like, it's very strange that so many of them have beliefs that, like, it's not effective, or that it doesn't, the vaccine, they don't think COVID really causes illnesses. Like 21% think that believe they can't prevent serious illnesses or hospitalization. So like a quarter of the people who are unvaccinated they're just not. I don't know what they think. It's maybe they don't think people are on the moon either, John. I have no idea what goes through people's minds, but this is part of the problem, right? This is what's really hurting us.
It's hugely worrying, because you got that segment of the population saying we don't believe it's effective, we're not going to get vaccinated. So how do you reach herd immunity? Which is, how do you prevent then jumping to other species? How do you prevent things jumping back? How do you prevent mutations? All this stuff becomes much, much more difficult, because we've got this pocket who are, based on, I don't know where they're getting their information from, based on that, aren't getting vaccinated, and it is a huge issue.
Yeah, it's prolonging things is what I
Yes,
believe.
absolutely.
It's extending this. It's actually, I think, the less when we have so many people that are vaccinated versus unvaccinated, that unvaccinated population is probably even causing, viruses mutate fastly.
Sure.
It may be making it more virulent in those individuals, or I'm not quite sure. But think of it this way, John. If you're remember, people under the age of 12 cannot get a vaccine.
Sure.
So think
Yep.
about what you're putting them a little bit in harm's way. Now, I don't want to get up there and say, "Oh, you're." Let me be very clear. We're not. I don't want to say you're killing children because you're not getting vaccinated. That's a bit of an extreme thing. However, it is something where if you're a healthy, normal adult who can get vaccinated and you're not, you are really kind of putting your brethren in harm's way in some degree. If you're, especially that age that's under 12, and then if you're under 12 and you have some immune deficiencies, then it gets even scarier for those parents.
Sure.
So I happen to
Yeah,
know someone that's
absolutely.
in that category. It's really, they are frustrated that people aren't, because they want to get their children vaccinated but can't. And then, John, I wonder what will happen as soon as it becomes fully approved, and I'm sure we'll be talking more about that.
I think that is, yeah. I read something over the weekend that I mean, from my perspective, approval is what is needed to hopefully nudge a few of these people a few more of these people
Well,
to get vaccinated.
I think they
I
say
think that
there'll
will
be a
help.
bump, but more importantly, then it becomes it'll be easier to mandate it, and that's
Exactly.
where you're going to see it go up. But why does it take that? I don't know, John.
I don't know.
It's hard to imagine.
I don't understand that either. I have to say, this is this is what I'm struggling with on a
Yeah,
daily
I mean, I
basis.
think there's
I
a
mean,
certain segment, right? There's a certain segment of the population that doesn't believe in modern medicine, but
but
that's a very small percentage. The people now who are like, "Oh, it's okay to take an aspirin or get all the other vaccines, but I don't want this one." It's hard to think of what's processing through their brains a little bit, but
yeah,
well, that's what
understood.
makes America great, I guess.
It is frustrating though when you think. I remember when we had the first emergency use authorizations a year ago, we were thinking by this stage next year we're going to be getting back to normal, and and life. Obviously, we've got a period we're going to have to deal with, but late 2021 we're going to be back to normal, and it feels like honestly that's been taken away from us again because we're not making the progress we should be making.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's move on to the next
And,
topic
and it, yeah,
because
that and the next topic segues right. Think about this. We just talked about how there's still a good percentage of the population who doesn't want to get vaccinated. And John, then what's happening on the other side, right?
yeah, and so like you say, I think the approval will help make it easier for companies to mandate, and we're hearing more and more about companies mandating the vaccine, particularly in the pharmaceutical industry. So, in the just ahead of this podcast, we have the headlines: Gilead joins the movement to mandate staff vaccinations against COVID-19, and it looks like the rest of the industry is following. Novartis, Pfizer, and Gilead roll out COVID-19 vaccination rules as Delta makes case for mandates, and that Delta is obviously a big driver in a lot of this. Eli Lilly joins the growing ranks of big pharma. I saw that Ionis mandated. There was also a survey on Endpoints News where you had, a CEO saying, this is not just about shot in your arm. It's about doing what's right for other people, and trying to build that protection for everyone, and that's why he's pushing to mandate it. I mean, I think we're in an industry where the majority of people are going to be vaccinated because it's what we do on a daily basis. But I still think mandate because people have had um, for months now, they've had the ability to choose to vaccinate or not. We're not getting where we need to be as a society, and I think really, from my perspective, we need to start mandating that people get vaccinated. And I don't, yeah, it's really interesting when you look at like TV programs that are based on historical things. My wife has had me watching Call the Midwife, which is a BBC. Um,
Mm-hmm.
series, and it's based in East End of London in the late 50s, early 60s, and I mean, it's a sob story every week, but there's more than a kernel of truth in episodes, and we've seen and there's been episodes where they talk about polio, and the kids lying in iron lungs while they try to recover from that, and then you think, well, polio is pretty much gone because of vaccination. Why can't we get that same message out about this virus to to make the same progress against it? It's, yeah, I'll step back, let you say what you
Well,
want to say.
yeah, I think it's so. I think the word that makes everybody uncomfortable is mandate. It's almost
Mm-hmm.
like we need a different word.
Yep,
I
yeah,
know that
yeah,
sounds crazy, but that just I think makes a certain segment of people just feel, I don't know if threaten's the right word or whatever, but there's a lot of things in America that are mandated. You got to pay taxes. You got to stop at stoplights. I mean, there is mandation across. We have laws everywhere. So, making it's, you can't send your kids to public school without a whole battery of vaccines. So this is just, it's just going to get added. And the resistance is, it's very weird in this instance. And you bring up some good points around like the polio vaccine and even like, recently, John, the HPV vaccine hit all sorts of, I mean, that vaccine for the first like 5 to 7 years it was approved, it caught so much bad press
sure.
about it
Yeah,
being like a right to have sex, and kids that think they're going to get this it's not, if they think they're getting, it's crazy the misinformation around this vaccine. And now HPV 10, this has almost been 20 years of it in the making. Man, cervical cancer is way down. I mean,
sure.
the you'll see that it can be eradicated. So I just it's hard to understand, and I think it's actually encouraging to see some of these larger companies, and there's a whole slew of smaller companies like
Sure.
Alnylam and IM Therapeutics, and we as an organization, our vaccine rate was so high where I don't know if we'll ever mandate it, but and that's the word that kind of, even saying it made me cringe a little bit, but because but it is something where, I mean, hospital systems across the U.S. have mandated vaccines for months now, and I don't know, there isn't too much of an outpouring there. I think it's just a natural progression, and over time, let's hope we see it after it gets approved. Unless you have some true justification, which I think is a small segment of the population, just roll your sleeve up and get the vaccine.
Sure. And that small segment of the population, if there's a genuine reason why they can't, then that's the responsibility of the rest of us to roll up our sleeves, because that's the herd immunity piece that we can protect them, and that's
And John, there is a lot of people, not a lot. There are people who will counter and say, "Well, it's my right," but you say it's your right until you're making our hospital systems overwhelmed. And I don't know how really overwhelmed they are or aren't, but when you start to impact the lives of those around you, especially that unvaccinated population, then it's not just about you. Like,
sure.
you should be somewhat, altruistic within society and not just be me all the time. So again, unless you have a real justification for it, I think you should be getting the vaccine. But
Yeah, that's very much my position too. I'm not going to argue against that. So shall we move on? We've obviously we've said our piece on that, and honestly, the way the news is, we're going to be revisiting these topics, and I think it is going to be interesting to see if if the Pfizer vaccine's approved, which looks like the front runner, then how does that change the landscape, and we'll see
well,
how
and
industry
John,
reacts to that.
J&J's gaining momentum again now that they figured out their manufacturing. Let's not forget about that one. But yeah, let's move on to our next topic. I think vaccines are not going anywhere, or even COVID discussions in time. But John, tell us a little bit more, because I think this is a very interesting little article here. This one is piqued
So
my
this,
interest.
so this is actually, yeah, it's the headline is how a century-old tuberculosis vaccine may help fight severe COVID-19. And it's a research group in India, and actually, this but we'll touch on possibly later. But they're not the only group looking at this vaccine. But a research group in India has found that century-old tuberculosis vaccine may have potential for fighting COVID-19. The the, the BCG jab it's the Bacillus calmette-guerin vaccine, which was used for tuberculosis. It's a live attenuated vaccine, first
Correct.
used in humans in 1921. I actually had that vaccine. So this is one where first of all, this was all done at school. This is all about the mandated vaccine type thing. All done at school, where you had a 6 needle punch on your forearm, and the 6 needle, if you, and I'm not sure what the time frame is. I think it must be a few weeks. If after a few weeks those 6 points on the needles don't swell up, then you get the BCG shot. Um, that was a so, and you get it in like your shoulder muscle. it could be sore. It
Oh
was one
yeah.
of these. It was and it could take. I think I've still got the scar from
Yeah,
mine.
you
So,
do. Yeah.
and it was like when I was 13, 14 is when you get the BCG. I know I'm off on a real tangent here,
No,
but
no, go.
actually,
It's okay because I
when
can
it
share. Yeah.
when it came to us applying for a green card, we had to, it was proof of vaccinate. We had to obviously give proof of vaccinations, but one thing that the US doesn't necessarily pay attention to is the BCG, but they tested us for TB, and so if we had this, we had the 6 needle test on our forearm. If we'd had a big reaction to that, which because we had the BCG, we could then had to go for X-rays and all sorts of things to prove that we didn't have TB. And we're going, but we're vaccinated. But it's like, it's different medical systems treat it differently. Anyway, in terms of the story here, it's basically it's all about the although it is a tuberculosis shot, it's thought to confer broad protection against other respiratory diseases by preparing the body with a strong, non-specific innate immune response. Um, Particularly in terms of decreasing pro-inflammatory cytokines, including TNF alpha, various interleukins, amongst others. And it's so, and those levels of the inflammatory the pro-inflammatory molecules was down compared to unvaccinated individuals. And I will stop talking and let
Yeah.
you chime in here.
Sure. And so, John, I'll pick it up nicely. So it seems like, well, wait a minute. You just said this thing is supposed to turn my immune cells on. Well, it turns on innate immunity, right? And you called it nonspecific pattern recognition, but it turns on innate immunity, which in turn will help regulate the pro-inflammatory. So, in a COVID situation or any sort of viral infections, any sort of infection, your pro-inflammatory immune system is just on. So this actually, I think, helps regulate that, which is a fascinating sort of thought process behind why it helps with just priming your immune system and helping to prevent, potential COVID.
Side effects.
Correct. So it's
Yeah.
like it's a way to sort of, because remember there's a great book. It's called the immune system, the dual edged sword, and because what I just said is that principle. There's a fine line between a nice, robust immune response versus one that's going haywire. And this helps prevent the haywiring. I think that's behind the
Yeah.
premise
Sure.
here.
Yes.
But, just BCG vaccines, I've been working on these things I think I've been on 4 or 5 trial when I say these things. So people have, like anything else, they've made advancements, engineered, taken out small pieces of it and used it it has a major impact on your toll-like receptors in the innate immune system. So, a lot of times certain vaccines might not produce a nice, robust immune response because it can't break the innate immune system or tolerance, so to speak, and it can't produce this adaptive immune response. Well, in conjunction with BCG, it can overcome that, and suddenly you got a vaccine that works. So there's still a ton of companies working in this space. So this
Sure.
isn't a new thing, but I love the idea that it's, for one, you're going back to a vaccine from 1921. I love that. I think it's funny that it touches your life in the way that it did, because really they kind of score your arm with it. They kind of
Sure.
like, it's literally, I don't know if it was this bad, but when it first came out, it was like a coat hanger, a hot coat hanger. They stuck you, and then they put the BCG in you, then you were good, right? And by the way, that pain in your arm, to prevent getting tuberculosis, man, get the pain in your arm just like COVID today, right? So then, John, I'm of age where, I was born in Okinawa, Japan. I was in the military. My dad was in the Air Force, and so when I came to the U.S., similar situations. I didn't. My brothers both have the scar in their arm, but I don't. So I was
Okay.
one of the first people to receive the actual, I guess it's like a TB vaccine without using the scoring of the arm. So, but I still had to get the tests on my forearm like you did. But
Sure.
then they vaccinated a different means, so I don't have a scar, and that would be in '77. So, that was the year that I got vaccinated with and that was like cutting edge back in the day for the military to be ahead of curve. So, John, but great, we're both walking down memory lanes, but I think it touches us.
It's probably about the same year as I had it, 'cause it'd be like first or second year of
Yeah.
of high school.
You were just getting a mandatory, but that by then it hadn't if you had been a couple years younger, you would have gotten a different vaccine, I bet. But
yeah.
yeah,
So yeah, just and just while we're on the topic, and to close this out, this isn't just looking at this as BCG with COVID-19. I thought that the other research groups looking at what BCG can do is like scientists at Massachusetts General Hospital found that BCG could correct regulatory T cells or Tregs to which raise an immune response to prevent the autoimmune destruction of insulin producing pancreatic cells. So it's basically looking what can BCG do to help type 1 diabetes. So it's what started as just like, oh, that's interesting because I've had the BCG. It turns out there's an awful lot more behind it, and it's just medicine is fascinating.
Yeah, John, I think it's for someone like you. It might be helping you more than you'll ever imagine, right? Like
exactly,
all vaccine fear. I'm convinced because I have an aversion to needles because of it. But man, did I get stuck as a kid? Oh, being in the military on in Okinawa, Japan, everything. Oh my God, every time we went, every time you. I remember like traveling to Guam, I had to get vaccinated. And then anytime you went off that island, man, they stuck the living heck out of you. Right. So, it's just something that I think, I feel like it's potentially primed the immune system. And there's even a case for it here. That's what it's all about regulating it the right way. That's the key. Like, overstimulation of the immune response is what happens in a COVID situation. So this helps regulate it. And then similarly, any sort of autoimmune diseases and stuff like that, this has some application to it. So a great story. I like we like good stories, John, versus some of the others, but I think we're ready to move on from our COVID to our non-COVID.
Yep. This is, again, this is, non-COVID. Just the headline is Altoida's Alzheimer's predicting smartphone app snags FDA breakthrough status. So this is a company called Altoida. They have a predictive system which uses artificial intelligence to analyze cognitive test results to determine whether a case of mild cognitive impairment will escalate into Alzheimer's within a year. So it's basically it's a 10-minute assessment on your phone. It's a slate of neurological tests for users aged 55 and up, and then using AI to analyze the test results. And so it's all based to feel like video games, and so it's a fairly informal process in terms of the actual test. But then the power behind it is the predictive nature. So obviously, I think it's having had relations who've obviously been diagnosed with Alzheimer's and watched their decline, that loss of mental faculties is something I really don't want to consider. But I think the effort and looking into how can we predict people as early as possible in Alzheimer's is a great thing. I'm fascinated by this.
Yeah, I feel like when the pandemic has snagged everything, so to speak, but Alzheimer's and dementia stuff's not going away, John. And as we live longer and longer, this is where really the breakthrough is needed, right? We kind of had that potential breakthrough with the Biogen drug, but this is the type of stuff that I think it's awesome, right? It doesn't give you a card to play video games. Don't think it's, I'll maybe parents who are listening, or if there's some kids, this is not a meaning video games are going to prevent Alzheimer's. That's not what this means here, but it does have, like you said, it's really cool, right? A 10-minute sort of, test you take, and it's got like 94% efficacy. So it's a good, the other piece is the artificial intelligence. This is great use of artificial intelligence. And then knowing that something's happening, that there are many things you can do naturally to help ward them off. Now, I think I don't want to say it's a death sentence, but we're all going to have this happen to us if we live long enough.
Sure.
But I think the whole idea is to massage that muscle. It's just one big muscle.
Yep.
And so I think it just is, there's a matter of if you take this and you see it happening, then I think there are probably some regimens that doctors and physicians need to start kind of prescribing, so to speak. And I really do think it's, John, if I don't particularly like Sudoku or things like that, but I definitely, want to stimulate my mind as much as possible. And I think if you're over a certain age, you should be, no different than doing some push-ups and jumping jacks. You should be either reading or doing something to stimulate your brain. I think a lot of times, and I fear for my mom at times, who's just stuck to the television. Like
Yeah,
she's somebody who I'm constantly kind of trying to get her to do more to stimulate her brain, although she is very active physically. So anyhow, that's my little diatribe on this. But I think it's a great story, and I think there's more to come. And I love the combination of AI coming into play here with a disease that I think is something that all of us will. It's going to impact everybody.
It's
No matter,
certainly
it'll impact everybody. Undoubtedly, every one of us will be impacted by this type of stuff.
it certainly touches everyone. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, whether directly or indirectly. So let's move on to our final news item, and this is U.S. sells one of a kind Wu-Tang album to cover Martin Shkreli's debt. So this sounds like a little bit off our beaten path, but actually it's directly in our wheelhouse. So Martin Shkreli was known for founding and managing a number of hedge funds, but he was also co-founder of Retrophin, who are now called Travere in San Diego, and then moving on to establish Touring Pharmaceuticals, who are now known as Viera Pharmaceuticals. And he became notorious in 2015 when he took on a drug that had long been commercialized, and then basically hiked the price by 5,000% overnight for it. It was a rare disease drug. It was the drug Daraprim, was used to treat a life-threatening parasitic infection, which basically then converted the cost of treatment for patients up to hundreds of thousands of dollars per year. And also then they actually did it helped to some extent because it turned a spotlight on pricing practices of some of the unsavory pricing practices that a number of companies have gone for. But he was actually arrested or convicted of fraud in 2017 in connection with two hedge funds he ran. And so the gist of the story here is he obviously had a residual fine as part of his sentencing. He was actually sentenced 7 years in prison as well. But the final piece to help him settle his debts with the nation was he sold a copy of Once Upon a Time in Shaolin by the Wu-Tang Clan, which is a one-off album. I remember that being released, and there was an auction to obviously buy the album, and Shkreli won the auction and obviously milked it for. He was definitely, at the time of the whole Daraprim price hike, he was milking his time in the limelight, and this Wu-Tang Clan purchase was all part of that. Well, now the album has been sold on to an unknown buyer, so I'll let you go.
Just anytime you can talk about dirty old who's a member of the Wu-Tang Clan, it's a good story, John. But Martin Shkreli is kind of the evil. He's the most evil figure in pharma. Still feeling that people still, if you sometimes say you're in that field, they'll immediately hone in on that. We're still dealing with pricing. It's been kind of a political topic the last few presidencies, and still is. You still hear about it. It hasn't gone away. But he was really like, the Darth Vader of Pharma for a while, right? And so, this story, I think I was kind of looking. I don't know if he's still in prison. He should be.
I think he is, but I'm not sure when he's due to come out.
It's unbelievable how he went through a couple companies doing this, right? Before finally we took notice, and then all along the way he was acquiring fine things, and this is kind of one of them. And I think it's about time, right? That's the word that comes to mind. It took a few years, but it's been sold, and I hope he's not well. I guess I'll say kindly. I wish him well, but I hope he's poor, although he's probably not. But I think it's a great story, and one guy describes it as it's a banger, man.
That was the lawyer for the purchaser. So, like I say, we don't know who the purchaser was. We do know who the lawyer was for that person, and I think they suspect that they paid somewhere in the region of $2 million for this album, which I'm happy for them to spend $2 million on an album. I should really just take this out and show my wife, because it totally justifies my much less significant purchases on Discogs and places. So when she looks at
Well,
my shelves full of vinyl and she's like, "How much did you spend on that?" I say, "At least I didn't spend $2 million, you know."
well, it may pay off, John. You never know. Maybe something happens and
Yes,
one of those albums is
yes,
worth a
yes.
lot.
Yes, so yes, the quote from Mr. Schoolage was that he had inspected the album as part of the arrangement. Asked what he thought of it. He said, "It's a banger, man. It's a banger." I thought that quote was fantastic. Although I love the fact that like various Wu-Tang aficionados like, yeah, it's only just a compilation. It's not that special, you know. Like, you can guarantee though, if someone had offered them for that album,
Yeah.
they'd have run with it. So
Well,
yes, I thought.
it's piqued my interest. I wonder if we could. I wonder if you could even hear it. I'm sure you can't. That would devalue it, I guess. But
Yeah, I don't know if that's the case. I really
but
don't know.
and it came up. It came up. You know, remember there was Once a Time in America movie, Once a Time in Mexico. It kind of popped up during. It seems like during that. I don't know if you remember those movies, but Once Upon a Time in Harlem's another one. They made a whole bunch of movies about Once Upon a Time, and so they must have been probably playing off of that a little. But
Yep.
John, good story there.
I will betray my age. I've never actually heard the Wu Tang Clan, but my kids have and like them. So yeah,
Yeah, I don't know too much about them, so you probably didn't get my reference. But they have a band.
I know
Yeah.
I know who the
Okay.
I know who the members are. You know, I got that piece, but
Yeah, and
yeah,
I know
I've
they paint
never
their
heard them.
faces a lot. I actually believe there's a couple songs by them I kind of like. I don't dislike their music, that's for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
But I'm not a big. I don't know any and don't have any albums or anything. Yeah, yeah. Go ahead.
Maybe sometime I should acquaint myself, but there's so much music I want to listen to anyway without
Yeah.
going out for that. Anyway, let's move on. That's the end of the news. As we mentioned in the introduction, we have other commitments, and there's various things that have caused the delay of this podcast. So we're not going to do a main topic this time. So it's just time to wind down, and we'll just have a quick chat before we then head
Yeah.
off to our other commitments. How was your weekend?
Well, John, I had a little bit of a flood here in my house, so I'm still dealing with all that. So it's been a very, it's been fun. We painted certain, when these things happen, you have two choices. You can just mope around, or you can try to make the best of it. And we've tried to make the best of it, but my house is in disarray still, and I won't go into great details, but we had 8 inches of rain and 6 hours of power outage and 80-mile-an-hour winds, and I'm not alone. I think
Yeah,
like a good third of my neighbors are experiencing similar things. In fact, almost everybody I talk to in my neighborhood is got some water issues, but it's coming along. But that results in a lot of like manual, just been working, and like my elbow hurts from stuff. My back, I don't know, John. It's been like but all along the way though, it's been very productive. We probably got rid of about a third of our junk, is how I'll say that. And so, maybe by in time, like I can at least see part of my basement now, which was good. But it's coming along. Like I said, I spent most
good.
of the weekend painting and putting together. I bought new furniture a long time ago from IKEA, sat in a box, right, and
Hmm.
so that kind of got me off the schneid a little bit. And then I still got a dining room that's like about a third of its missing walls and ceilings, and
Oh wow.
so that'll get dealt with. But that was a bigger issue. I find myself up on a ladder Friday, packing, caulking into some areas near my. I got gutters that are too small, and then so water's overwhelmed them over the time, and there was some big holes that we had to patch up. So it rained on Friday, and I was able to prevent rain getting into my house. Nothing fun in my world, John. There's no uni pizzas. There's no
Yeah.
briskets. There's no Boston pork butts. There's nothing fun, John. It's been work, 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 but productive. And all
Yeah.
along the way, my wife and I have had a good time. We have had some
Yeah.
fun.
So we're in that same boat. Well, it must be a different system, but we're under flood watch at the moment here, because I think we saw fallout from Fred, and then we still got ongoing rain issues. The tropical storm Henry, that didn't impact us because we're far enough west, but we are seeing a lot of rain. So all the creeks and rivers are all well up at the moment. But our weekend was relatively quiet. We're just trying to figure out. So our biggest issue for us is we found that Jamaica is going into emergency lockdown, and it's also on the I think travel is not being advised from here to Jamaica. So I'm not sure what's going to happen with our son's wedding in November. So that could be a bit of an issue. So we're watching that. But yeah, it was, apart from that, quiet.
Yeah, well, that's a concern. I have a 20-year anniversary. I'm supposed to go to Vegas, but that's a lot different. I feel comfortable that in November I might make Vegas. It's not quite the same as going international, but COVID's still, I think there's some positive stuff here in Kansas City. There is a little uptick in mask wearing, which I'm okay with. I'm not, I'll put a mask on if I have to, but I think there's been just a more recent buzz, and to me it seems like more people are kind of being reminded, not just don't we don't have to stop living, but just know that it's, when you go out, you should kind of try to keep a little bit of distance. So I was happy to see some of that. Not that mask mandates have come back, but you just see a lot more, just a lot more kind of returning back to that, instead of just pushing your way through a door, kind of waiting and being nice. I saw kind of, at least in my little sphere of things, I feel like that upticked. And then, of course, the Premier League's back, John. And oh my goodness, John, Roman Lukaku in Chelsea again is fabulous. I don't know if you know who I'm talking about.
Yeah, I saw.
Oh, but Chelsea is poised to be. Yeah. I don't want to talk about it. They're so good right now. They are dangerous, and I'm sure with him at the strike, that was the missing piece for a couple years now. And mind you, they finished fourth, but there's still a lot of soccer to go, and still a lot of good teams out there. But it's been a lot of fun. And I do got to give a shout out to the recently promoted Brentwood there, who's got a win and a tie and kind of sitting top half of the table after a couple weeks. So it's fun stuff.
Yeah, I have to. I mean, their win was against Arsenal, though. I have to wonder what's going on with Arsenal. They are, not impressive.
Yeah, they're gonna. We got another soccer fan, Kevin Burns, who is on our BD team. He's a big fan, and so I was communicating with him a little bit over the weekend. He's an Arsenal fan, but they have a lot of answers to be. They got a lot of questions and not many answers right now. They'll finish mid-pack. They got way too much talent not to, but they are struggling right now. Yeah,
sure. Yeah, and of course for us, it's Norwich is my wife's family's team, and they had, for a newly promoted team to come up against Liverpool, Manchester City as your first two fixtures is horrible. So
it couldn't get any worse. I mean, they haven't scored yet, right? Like they're.
It's too early to judge them.
Yeah, and I like the Canaries too. I mean, not just because they've got that bright yellow, but they've got a good coach, and they were up a couple years ago, got relegated. They came back, kept the team. They're strong. Just running into a buzzsaw playing, two of the top 5 teams like that coming out of the game. Yep. But it's been an interesting thing. And then, I still follow the MLS and Sporting KC. I got to somewhere in the melee. I went out to a Sporting KC game, and they had a goal in the 6th minute of 8 minutes of stoppage time to salvage a tie. So that was, it was, it was fantastic. It was, crowd went wild. That was probably the highlight of the week for me right there. But it was a good time to watch. There was a middle of the pack team, Portland, who's playing. They should have really beat them, but they gave up an early goal. Portland sat back. We had possession 75% of the game and finally put one home, but it was fun. Anyhow, John, enough about that.
Yep, go.
I think I got to move on myself, and John. Yep. So have a great rest of your day, week here, and as always, it's been a pleasure. 47.
Yep.